Just everyone, please be aware that this session is being recorded for training purposes. By the way, have you already checked your energy bills? Perhaps we can help you with some of those elements. No, just kidding.
Okay. I was like, oh, okay.
That's the way every call desk starts the call. This call is being recorded for training purposes and quality.
Yeah. Everyone agrees? Yes. Okay.
Everyone agrees? Yes?
Yep.
Yes.
Sure. Yes. Great. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining. It's really exciting to get started with this series of sessions where we're trying to clarify some of the doubts that came along with the situation that we're going through. Fortunately, things are looking well, and it seems like we'll make it to the other side unscathed. Let's see. But we really want to thank the experts, Jocelyn Díaz and Paulina Bravo, joining us today for this session. And everyone from the public, thank you very much for joining. We have already received some of your questions. So after we go through the material that Jocelyn and Paulina will be sharing, we'll try to answer some of your questions. And if we can't do it today, we'll have another session tomorrow where we can continue discussing. So please stay tuned, okay? And without further ado, Exatec Australia, Jocelyn and Paulina from I-Migration, Jocelyn, and Paulina from Latinoz Education. We want to welcome you to this session on immigration and education matters in Australia. Okay, thank you everyone. And Jocelyn, you can take the floor now.
Okay, so I will talk today about the current situation, some visa options for people who is experiencing difficulties or they want to extend the visa because their visa is about to expire and they want to see how can they apply for another visa, what's available for them. We will focus mainly on that. If we have time at the end, I have prepared some information about general skill migration. If we don't have time, we can share this information through a video that we did a few weeks ago. Okay, so let's start. As Arturo said, I work for I-Migration. I'm a registered migration agent. We are based in Melbourne. I've been in Australia for about 15 years now. I'm originally from Mexico, and I have been working in migration services for the past 10 years. So some things that we do are temporary visas, different kind of temporary visas, business sponsor visas, graduate visas. We also do permanent visas, either through through the general skill migration or through business sponsor, family sponsor, partner visas. What we don't do as migration agents that Paulina does is education. We don't do any education-related services, including student visa applications. So that's why Paulina is here today to answer all questions related to student visas and courses of study. So first of all, for people who is already in Australia and have a valid visa, if you want to apply for another visa, you still can do it. There's no, there haven't been any changes in the ways of lodging visa applications or requirements for any of the visas. So the current COVID-19 situation hasn't affected the visa processes because we have lots of clients asking how can this affect my eligibility for a future visa. So it doesn't affect at all. Everything continues the same way it used to be before the emergency situation. So if you still can apply for a visa, just keep your visa process as usual and lodge a visa application before your current visa expires. Now, there are a couple of options that people can consider if they are affected by COVID-19 pandemic, in terms of, for example, people whose visa is about to expire and they need to leave Australia and cannot leave because of the current situation, or people who cannot apply for any other visa. So there are basically two options that the Department of Immigration is offering at the moment. One is the subclass 408. This is usually a training visa. However, it's open for people that it's currently affected by COVID-19, but not everyone is eligible for this visa subclass. So there are a few requirements that they need to meet. The purpose of this visa under COVID-19 situation is to remain in Australia, lawfully, of course, and specifically, they encourage people working in critical sector to apply for this visa. So this is for people working in agriculture, healthcare, aged care, disability care, or childcare. So they are potentially eligible to apply for this visa, and the only people who will be granted working rights. There's another criteria. If you don't have any other visa option and you cannot leave Australia, then you still can apply for the 408 visa, even if you're not working in the critical sector. However, this means you cannot apply for any other visa, including, for example, another student visa or a visitor visa or a bridging visa. So it's only if you don't have any other option, you can apply for this 482 visa subclass. But unless you're working in a critical sector, you won't have any working rights attached to this visa. The application fee is $0. You don't have to pay anything to apply for this visa. And the visa duration, it can be granted for up to 12 months if you are working in the critical sector. Otherwise, it will be assessed on a case-by-case basis, but usually granted for a sufficient period of time to be able to leave Australia. You can include any other family members. And basically that's it for the 408 visa. It's a very straightforward visa. So if you are if you are working in the critical sector, you can apply for this visa. If you cannot apply for any other visa, you still can apply for the 408 visa, but it will be granted with no working rights. Then the next
Jocelyn,
option, yes.
I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but I don't know if it's me, but I think we're not following the presentation. I think I'm only seeing the introduction page. I'm not sure if it's just me.
Yeah, no, it's also me. So do you have it in presentation mode, Jocelyn?
Yes. Maybe the screen you're sharing, it's not the one you are presenting.
Oh yes, now that's it. Now we can see.
Yep, now we can see it. Sorry about the interruption.
That's okay. So this was the previous one.
Yeah.
And thank you. The next one. So the next option available is the Bridging Visa E. This is not the best option because it has more negative aspects than positive aspects. So bridging visas basically can be bridging visas A, B, C, D, and E. And bridging visa A, which is usually granted when you lodge a valid application in Australia, it's very flexible, it's the most friendly visa. But if you are getting bridging visas B, C, D, and E, the visa conditions are getting more strict. So the bridging visa E, to put it that way, is probably the most strict bridging visa. Basically, this bridging visa E, I only recommend to apply for it if you are leaving Australia eventually, or if you plan to leave Australia, you don't have any other option, and as long as you're aware of the visa conditions and the consequences of applying for a bridging visa E. This bridging visa E can only be lodged after your current visa expires. So basically, when you are unlawful in Australia, when you don't have any other visa. It has to be lodged in person through the form 1005. It's free of charge as well, and it generally involves an interview with the delegate of the Minister of Immigration or with a case officer, and you have to show that you already started arrangements to leave Australia or that you plan to leave Australia in certain time. The visa can be granted for short periods of time, but if you are still not able to leave Australia, it can be extended for as long time as you need. The visa conditions, it doesn't have any study rights, it doesn't have any working rights, it doesn't have any travel rights. Now, the advantages of this visa is, for example, for students that are here for a short period of time whose visa is about to expire and they already plan to return to their home country, but they cannot travel because of the current pandemic situation, this is a good option because the intention of this visa is to leave Australia as soon as they can. So the condition is you must leave Australia if you get this visa granted. That's probably the main advantage, that you will be able to stay in Australia lawfully until you can leave Australia. Disadvantages, there are a lot of them. So the main one is that this bridging visa E doesn't have any working rights as soon as it's granted. However, it is possible to waive this condition, but it's up to the case officer to grant you the waiver or not. Some cases they don't grant it, some cases they grant it, but there's no guarantee that you can get this waived. Another disadvantage is that if you have a bridging visa E, you won't be able to lodge any other visa whilst in Australia. There are a few exemptions. For example, humanitarian visas, if you are in danger or something like that, you may be able to lodge humanitarian visas, but they're very particular exemptions. So usually in normal circumstances, you won't be able to apply for another substantive visa. Another condition is that the applicant must notify the Department of Immigration with at least 2 days in advance about any change of address, because of course the Department of Immigration needs to be aware of the location of the applicant. If you fail to meet the visa conditions, it can result in visa cancellation and in subsequent detention. It doesn't have any overseas travel rights. That means people cannot apply for a bridging visa B to be able to travel overseas and come back to Australia. That means if you get a bridging visa E granted, you must leave Australia. That's not negotiable. If you apply, because this visa application has to be applied for when you don't have a valid visa, so when you are unlawful, if the applicant lodges a visa application after 28 days from the expiry date of the last substantive visa, the applicant will get a ban and won't be able to apply for any temporary visa for a period of 3 years. So that's another important condition. If you hold a bridging visa E, that will stop the clock for the eligibility for Australian citizenship. So the time for the Australian citizenship will reset as soon as you get the bridging visa E. When you apply for the visa, you must declare if you get a bridging visa E, you must declare in any other visa applications, either for Australia or for visiting any other country, that you held a bridging visa E and that you were unlawfully in Australia for a short period of time. Failing in declaring this information will result in visas refused, not only for Australia, but also for other countries. And if Australia has to deport you for some reason, you may incur on a debt with the Australian government to cover the cost of your removal from Australia. So as you can see, this bridging visa E is not the best option necessarily, and it's usually only applied for when someone plans to leave Australia. There are some other circumstances where people can apply for this bridging visa E. For example, if they're on detention, if they are under an appeal process at the at the ministerial court, but they're very limited circumstances. So these are basically the two options that the Department of Immigration has given for the current COVID-19 emergency situation. As I said, all other visa processes remain the same, nothing has changed. However, they have relaxed some of the visa conditions, specifically for two visas of classes. One is the working holiday visa. Usually for people who is on a working holiday visa, they have a maximum limit of 6 months to working for the same employer. This 6 months period can be waived if the visa holder is working in the critical sectors, which are healthcare, aged care, agriculture, plant, bushfire recovery. So this is an actual exemption for working holiday visa holders. And there is also an exemption for student visas. As you know, students can only work a maximum of 40 hours per fortnight while the course is in session. But if you have a student visa and you are employing the aged care or healthcare section, you can work full time. So that work condition doesn't apply, but it's only for aged care and healthcare sectors. They can work unlimited hours. Then is the funding support available. Paulina is going to talk about this in more detail, but I will mention this from the visa point of view. So at the moment, there are 3 types of funding support across Australia. One is the early access to superannuation fund. And at the moment, all temporary visa holders, including people who is on a student visa, on a business sponsor visa, on a graduate visa, they can access to their superannuation early by providing evidence of financial hardship. So they, basically anyone who is on a temporary visa and have been working in Australia for at least 12 months can access the superannuation early without having any negative impact in any future visa application or in general in his life in Australia. Then the other 2 programs are the Job Keeper and the Job Seeker. These 2 are programs that only Australian citizens, Australian permanent residents who got a visa granted before 1st of March 2020, and certain New Zealander visa holders and humanitarian visa holders are eligible for these funds. So temporary visa holders are not eligible for your Job Keeper or Job Seeker. Only Australian citizens, permanent residents, some New Zealand citizens, and humanitarian visa holders. That's basically the main eligibility in terms of visas. There's also one fund support for international students recently announced by the Victorian government. This is only for the state of Victoria, and that's they announced on 29 of April 2020 that the state of Victoria can support international students who are on a student visa. They can be eligible for a relief payment. It will be a one-off payment, only one, up to $1,100. They may also provide rent if they need a rent subsidy. And it's designed for vulnerable students, vulnerable international students who have lost their job or have a significant reduction in their income and are facing financial hardship. So it's not for everyone. You have to show that you are facing financial hardship, and the amount can be up to $1,100. Eligible students, they must be on a student visa. They must be international students enrolled in Victoria's tertiary education providers, which include university, TAFEs, private vocational education and training providers, and English language college. This is not applicable for students who are doing, for example, high school or primary school. It's only for tertiary education, TAFEs, and English courses, basically. This is what I have in my presentation before Paulina can talk about these support funds available. But I have some other slides about general skill migration, which are some of the questions that we receive through the email. And if we have time, we can come back to talk about the general skill migration options, which is something that everyone wants to know, how to get permanent visa. So if we have time, we come back to this. In the meantime, Paulina is doing her presentation.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you, Arturo and Exatec, for having me here. And I'm going to share my screen now. Just give me 1 second. Okay. So is it visible there for everyone?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, perfect.
Yep.
So just like Jocelyn was saying, now I'm going to take the turn to talk about what students, especially Latin students, are facing here in Australia due to the COVID-19 crisis. And first of all, well, I'm going to give you a very brief introduction about what Latinos is and what we do here in Australia. So first of all, we have some industry endorsements that ensure that everything we do and the work and the attention we provide to students are following following the high standards in service and counseling with students. So we have these three associations, if you want to call it like that. So we have the endorsement by Pierre, Itzana, and Itzea. Basically, that's, I'm not going to spell it because I'm terrible at spelling, but those are the associations we are working with very, very closely to provide students with lots of information and support now during the crisis. And about us, well, basically, I was an international student, just like many of you, and if you're watching, in 2016, I came to Australia to study English to improve. And after that, I was offered a position in the marketing team at the school I was working with. So I've been basically working in education since 2016. That's almost 4 years now. And in 2018, I decided to launch a personal blog so I could share my life experience and some useful tips to international students aiming to arrive in Australia soon, to study, to live, whatever they wanted to do here. And well, after having contact with many people wanting to come, I came along with my business partner now, and we decided to launch Latinos Education. We are basically aiming at providing honest and realistic advice to Latin students who are planning to study in Australia. One of the difference we have, and something we have made our pillar in our service, is that our students' cases are our cases. So those who know me basically know that I will be chasing them to send me papers and comply with the due dates and everything, because I try to take their cases as my own cases, and we look after their dreams as if they were our own dreams. Just 1 second. Okay. So what's going on with student visas and COVID-19? Well, there are 5 common scenarios due to the COVID-19 regarding student visas, and those are the ones that I would like to address first, because most of the questions that I get from my students or other students from other agencies are basically based on these 5 scenarios. So I'm not going to read them out. I'm going to go directly to them one by one. So the first one is that if you're in Australia with an active visa, what happens? Well, first of all, you will have to continue with your visa until the expiry date. There are no significant changes regarding those who are currently in, there's a message there. There are no changes, sorry, but you must comply with the visa conditions. This is quite important, especially for those students who are thinking of, due to the financial hardship they're facing, not comply with the payments or the attendance or not delivering their assignments. This is very, very important because they still have to follow the visa conditions they have to comply with. students are not allowed to work more than 20 hours per week when the course is in session. This is basically the same rule that they have been following during the course of their visa, unless it's specified on or they are on holidays. This is also something that Jocelyn was talking about before. There are some specific sectors where students are allowed to work more than 20 hours per week, but we will talk about it later. And students who are currently in Australia with an active visa cannot stay in Australia when their visa expires. This is very, very important, and it goes back to what Jocelyn was saying about the bridging visa E. There is like this misunderstanding or some misleading information about the bridging visa E, that some students consider it an option to stay in Australia after their current visa expires. This is not true. They have to apply for a new visa or arrange their departure if they want to if you want to be a lawful citizen, a lawful visa holder. So this is very, very important. If they have no options, then they can apply for the bridging visa E, but that's like the last resource. It's not recommended at all for someone that has other options, like applying for a further student visa or a temporary visa like a visitor, etc. The second scenario that I would like to talk about is about those students offshore. Those are the ones that are in their countries still and have applied for a visa and they're still waiting to come to Australia. Let's say there's someone that already paid for their course. They applied for a visa before the 20th of March when the travel ban was set, and they have not received any news yet about their visa. So the first thing they have to do is contact their agents. That's the first point of contact they have to touch. After that, they need to consider and discuss, because the Australian borders will not be lifted soon. There are no approximate dates yet. There's nothing certain at this time. However, it's very known that the borders will be closed still for a while. So with this uncertainty, there are only three possible options. The first one is to start your course in your country online, because it's already paid. You already probably have a COE and you applied for a visa. So you can start your course online in your country and later on apply for a visa once the travel ban is lifted. The second option is ask your agent to move your course until the 2021. This is probably the best date that you can consider to come to Australia, but this might incur in fees depending on if you had a promotion, if you had a special deal with the school, if there are special fees for changes in your enrollment. So there might be a cost regarding the movement of your course. And the third option is ask your agent to apply for a course withdrawal. If you want to cancel your course, you might be subject to the policies that every school has regarding refunds. So if you cancel in a certain time before your course starts, you might get just a partial refund of the fees you've paid to the date. So these are the three scenarios the students can face if they are offshore, and they already applied for a visa. So if you move your course or start online being offshore, your visa might be put on hold. Let's say that you already applied for it, so your visa application will still be active, but maybe put on hold. Or in the worst scenario, it could be canceled and you'll need to apply for a new visa after the international travel is resumed. If you withdraw or cancel your course, your visa application will be canceled as well. You cannot apply for a visa without an active course, okay? So the third scenario is for those students with an active visa who left Australia. Let's say that they were studying a master and then they decided to go on holidays before the COVID-19 and the borders closing, and they cannot come back. So if you were studying in Australia, but you left the country and you cannot come back to continue your course, there are three options as well. So first of all, then again, contact your agent or your school. You can also contact your school once you're already studying at an institution, so it can be more direct, but also rely on your education agent. Consider that the Australian border will not be lifted soon. That's, again, very important because we don't know when that's going to happen. And the three possible options that you have to discuss and you have to assess and weigh in is, if you want to continue with your course in your country, you can do it online, and you can apply for a visa later on when the travel ban is lifted. The second option is that you can ask your agent or school to defer your course until the 2010-21. Deferring means suspend. Basically, you will pause your course, and then once the travel ban is lifted, you could come back to Australia, but you will need to apply for a new visa. And this might incur in also fees, depending on your school's policies and also, of course, in the application at that time. So if you apply for a new visa, definitely the application fees will be different. Okay, this is very important because if you left the country, your visa will keep going. It will still be active until the expire date. And if you can come back to Australia after the visa has expired, then you will have to apply for a new visa. The third option for this scenario is that you can ask your agent to apply for a course withdrawal, basically the same. You can cancel your course, but you might not get any refunds at all, because once your course is in session and you have started, most of the schools will not give you a refund if you decide to cancel afterwards. This is very important, and that's why you need to contact your agent, because they can help you negotiate with the school, and they also can explain to you the policies that apply in your case. Basically, that's what I said already. I'm going to move on to the next one. And the fourth scenario are those students who have paid for a course. They already paid, but they are offshore. They are still in their countries. So they have not applied for a visa yet. They only pay the course, okay? So they don't have any visa application. They're still in the middle. So first of all, again, contact your agent. Then consider that the Australian borders will not be lifted soon. And in your case, you could, the Australian government already allowed students to start the course online if they're in their country. So you can start studying in your country without a visa. That's up to you. We understand that, especially with Mexico and Latin America, the schedules are crazy. So if in Australia the classes are in the morning, then you will be studying basically in the early morning here in Australia, 12 a.m., 1 a.m. So that's probably not gonna work out. So you can decide if you want to do it, and once the travel ban is lifted, you can apply for a visa to come to Australia and continue with your course face-to-face, provided the schools are open already. You can also ask your agent to move your course until 2021. I personally have a lot of cases like these that I had to move the students' courses until 2021, assuming that the borders will be open by then. But these will, of course, incur in some fees depending on the case and depending on the school's policies. And you can also ask your agent to apply for a cancellation. And in this case, because you have not applied for a visa yet, you might get a partial refund, or perhaps almost 95% of your investment. So this is also a very stressful scenario, because most of the students were planning on coming to Australia, and then in the middle of the process, they couldn't even get the visa, the application done. So they are still kind of in the middle, all right? And then the fifth and the safest scenario is those students who are planning to study in Australia, but do not have a course nor a visa yet. So good news for these ones, they're safe. They don't need to do anything but continue to study English in their countries. Compare study options. This is a great time because schools are moving their course options and their fees all the time due to the changes in the demand and the options they have. And you can save up money because, as you know, and being honest, the world will start living in a crisis situation. We will probably have a recession. We will have the worst case scenario, a decrease in the economy. So this is very important. you have to come to Australia or any other country you want to go to with a good margin of savings, so you can ensure that your stay the first months without a job will be livable. And then once the travel ban is lifted in both Australia and in your country, because the countries are not having the same restrictions at the same time. So probably Australia will be removing the travel ban, let's say in September, December this year, but maybe in your countries it's just hitting, the wave is just hitting. So maybe they will be avoiding traveling, I don't know, until next year. So once everything's kind of okay, you can then apply for a visa. That's our recommendation. Don't rush any plans if you have not guaranteed or paid any courses yet. And well, just remember that everything can change unpredictably. Every single day we see the news, we watch what's going on. We watch the news and see what's going on, and we can tell that basically everything is uncertain at this point. And now in regards to the support for international students in Melbourne, specifically in Melbourne, there have been some initiatives that have been quite useful. And the most popular one, of course, is the International Student Emergency Relief Fund, organized by this is for the Victoria State Government through the unit, the student unit called Study Melbourne. So that's very important. That's the channel where you have to apply for the relief fund and you can access to it. So once we share this presentation, if we do, all these logos have the link directly to the applications and the information on their websites. But if you want to register your intention to claim this one-off payment that Jocelyn already mentioned before, that goes up to $1,100, you will need to demonstrate that either you are unemployed, you have hours reduction in your job, or you are facing financial hardship. So this is one of the funds that are at the moment being popular because most of the students, are suffering from these conditions, unemployment, hours reduction, etc. So if they want to register, first of all, the first step has to be entering their details. And in a second phase, the Study Melbourne will contact them directly to assess if they are eligible for the fund. The second one is working for Victoria. As we know, the Victoria government has issued an announcement that they are offering temporary jobs directly to work with the Victoria government. And they are available on the website and through the application called Sidekicker. So some students already know about this one, but the process to access these job opportunities is through the Victoria government website first, and then downloading the Sidekicker application so they can start getting the offers according to their profiles and their needs. And another fund relief that was set was from the Australian Red Cross. So they released this emergency relief support for people on temporary visas. This is not exclusive for international students. This is allowed to be accessed by temporary visas, postgraduates, etc. So if there's someone needing emergency shelter, funds, or food, they can send an email directly to the Red Cross, this direction here, explaining their situation, and they will contact and assess case by case. All right, and another option the students have is if they are facing difficulty to pay their rent, the Australian Homestay Network also set a website where students can apply to get cheap homestay from Australian families. And this is quite important because they will be living with a family who will also provide meals as part of the service for a very, very cheap cost compared to what students usually pay for just a room. These are other 4 options students have in Melbourne. Just not to be repetitive, just quickly, the early access to superannuation that Jocelyn mentioned. This is only for students who have been in Australia for over a year. So those who arrived in Australia, let's say 3 months, 4 months, 6 months ago, they unfortunately cannot access these funds. But those who can do it through their MyGov account. So once they have lodged the tax return, they already created their MyGov account. So once they access that account, they can register their intention to access the superannuation early. Another option, as Jocelyn mentioned before, is the extra working hours for students in essential jobs. So if you're working at supermarkets, aged care, health, or disability centers, you may be eligible to work for more than 40 hours fortnightly. This is important because this is subject to eligibility. So if you have not been working in supermarkets before or in health centers, and this is your first job or you just started, you might not be eligible. This is meant to be mostly for students who have been working there before the crisis started. In regards to the tenant rent relief, this is for students who are included in the lease of their accommodations. So those students who have an verbal agreed contract with someone just renting a room, this might not apply. The student needs to be included in the contract or the lease as a tenant, and they have to demonstrate that they are facing financial hardship as well. Let's say that they lost their job or they have reduced hours working at the moment, or their income has gone down, that the rent they're paying is accounts for more than 30% of their income. So that's also important. And they can apply for this support through the Victoria website as well. And the relief will be paid directly to the agency that holds the lease or the landlord directly. And the last one is for those students who are requiring legal advice on working rights and accommodation. So we know, especially because I see it every single day, students are facing issues as well regarding their accommodation, if the tenant or the landlords are increasing their rents, or maybe their working rights are being threatened as well. So if they need free advice on these issues, they can send an email directly to Study Melbourne at info@studymelbourne.vic.gov.au, and they can arrange an online appointment with either lawyers or people specialized in accommodation, so they can guide them through the process of getting a complaint, a formal complaint, or just getting any dispute with a solution. And well, that will be it from my side. So if you have any questions, please fire
Before
away.
we continue with that part, Paulina, I'd just like to make a quick comment on behalf of MEXVIC, the Mexican Association, the Association of Mexicans in Victoria, and also of Exatec. I mean, we are also offering resources. I mean, it's not on the same, with the same extent and the same volume as the Red Cross and Student Study Melbourne and all those other organizations. We're also trying to do a little bit by offering digital gift cards. MEXVIC is also trying to collect some items to provide to people who are struggling in these times. And also MEXVIC and Exatec, we are trying to share as many links as we can for the local population in Melbourne, mainly because that's where a lot of us are, on places where you can go and get free food, when you can get some items for food also that you can take away, and also, as I said, the digital gift cards that we are providing. And I mean, if you need any kind of help, just please reach out to us and we'll try to do our best to help in whatever we can. Okay.
One more thing, sorry, before going to the question section. There's two more scenarios that I didn't cover in the initial application. Mm-hmm. One is for people who is on temporary business sponsor visas. That's the 482 visas of class, some 457 visas of class. Some of them have either been stood down or have had their work hours reduced. And many of them have the same questions. What happened with my visa? Because their visa, one of the visa conditions is that they must work full-time for their employer. So that's okay. If they get hours reduced, that's fine, as long as the employer pays the portion of the salary agreed to get the visa. So if they're doing half of the hours, then the employer must pay half of the wages. That's totally okay. It doesn't matter how long time they need to do less hours until things come back to normal. They're not incurring in any illegal things, or they are not, they still are meeting the visa requirements, as long as the employer keeps paying the portion of the work done. And another question, if they are stood down, that's still okay. They are allowed to be stood down or suspended work for maximum 3 months. So after 3 months, they won't be complying with the visa conditions, and that should be reviewed on case-by-case basis. Another question they have, because some of them have been stood down, can I work for a different employer other than the one who gave me the sponsor? The answer is no. If you are on a business sponsor visa, you must meet the visa conditions. You can only work for the employer who nominated for the 482 visa. You are not allowed to do any other kind of work. You cannot work for any other employer. You cannot be self-employed or work with an ABN on your own, unfortunately. So you must meet your visa conditions and maintain your employment with that employer. And the other scenario is for people who unfortunately left Australia in the middle of this crisis and cannot come back. They're usually on temporary visas. It can be graduate visas, it can be business sponsor visas, student visas. That's a very difficult situation because Australia has banned the entry for all temporary visa holders unless they can show exceptional circumstances. And basically these exceptional circumstances are only if they are working in the health sector. If they have temporary visas and are working in the health sector, they may apply for a waiver and still get a special permit to come back to Australia. Otherwise, they cannot come back. The visa keeps going, the time of the visa keeps going. It doesn't mean that the visa will freeze until they are able to come back. So as Paulina say, if unfortunately they're offshore and cannot come back to Australia and the visa expires during that period, they must apply for a new visa to be able to return to Australia. And one last one, for people who is on visitor visas at the moment, we have lots of clients who are permanent residents or Australian citizens whose parents are visiting them and are not able to come back to the home countries. So there are a few things they can do. If they have condition A503 on the visitor visa, that means a restriction preventing them for applying for another subsequent visa whilst in Australia. They can apply for this condition to be waived, and they can apply for another visitor visa whilst they're in Australia, or for the bridging visa E whilst they make arrangements to leave Australia. So there's still some options for these people who are on visitor visa. They can apply for an extension of the current visitor visa or apply for the waiver if they have condition 8503. But at the moment, the Department of Immigration is quite relaxed in these situations, just for visitor visa holders who are currently in Australia. I think that covers most of the scenarios for people affected by COVID-19. And then, yeah, we can go to the question section if someone has questions.
And yeah, precisely we had, I think you already answered one part of the questions that we had received from people in the previous days. Jocelyn, Denny, I think we have Denny Martinez in the audience. She was one of those persons who submitted those questions. Denny, was that clear enough, or would you still like to make another question or clarify a little bit more on what Jocelyn explained?
Hi, thanks. No, I think it was, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think it was clear. I just would like to go through my second question if we have time. And it was like, in case I apply for a skill visa, on your experience, how long it's gonna take that option? I'm an architect, and I mean, I can like get all the paperwork done, but I have heard like different stories about that, that it could be 1 year, 2 year, like there is no timing frame. So I could just like to know what's your experience on that.
I prepared a very short presentation on general skill migration visas, which may answer your question. I'm not sure if we still have time to do that. I think it would take probably 10, 15 minutes because it's a very, very, very broad area. It depends on the occupation. It depends what visa pathway are you applying for. It depends on the current points you have at the moment, because invitations are only sent to applicants which have at least 95 points or more for the 189 visa subclass, which is the independent, but there are also some other options. So it depends on many factors, and we usually assess that and give you an accurate idea if we further assess your case, because we need to know, do you have a skills assessment? If you don't have a skills assessment, are you eligible for this skills assessment? Can you apply as an architect? Do you have to find an alternative occupation? Because I know getting a skills assessment as an architect with overseas qualifications, it's very, very tough. So you may need to consider some alternative occupations.
Yep. I think, Jocelyn, we can go to the next question from Miguel, who is also in the audience, who had something that may need to be answered by either Paulina or yourself. And then he also had another question related to skilled migration visa. So if Paulina and you still have time, I think now we don't have any time limitation in terms of the duration of the session, the technology. But if everybody can stay after answering this question, we can go to your next part of the presentation. What do you think? Yeah,
I'm okay. I have time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Arturo,
Paulina, are you okay?
I have to leave, but I'll be in touch with Jocelyn.
Sure.
Great. Thanks for
Great.
attending, Rodrigo.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you. Okay, so the question from Miguel was, well, actually he had a couple of questions. The first one is he's on a student visa, and he's doing a diploma, but the diploma is only going on weekends. So he has the rest of the week available to work. And he would like to work full time, but he's not allowed legally by his visa to do so. Will he be able to obtain another visa to be able to do that, to work full time?
It depends on your eligibility. So you can look at business sponsored visas if you have an eligible employer who is willing to sponsor you. You can look at visas through the General Skill Migration Program. Again, if you're eligible, if you have enough points, if you meet the eligibility of a state or territory. I think those are basically your options. If you have a partner, you can look at joining your partner's visa or apply for a partner visa. For what you say, I don't think you're eligible to apply for a graduate visa because you are just completing an advanced diploma. I'm not sure what's the duration. I'm not sure if you studied something else in the past, but you can apply for a further visa, but you need to meet eligibility.
So Miguel, would you like to make a comment?
Yes, I have reviewed also all of those options also. The problem is that I have been like applying to jobs, but I think most of the jobs require like the full-time legal requirement, even if they say that I can like work with them, they will not consider me only if I have that kind of visa. And I wanted to know, so for some independent visa, before I go to the second part of my questions, that is, are the skilled visa 190? So
That's
I just
sponsored
wanted
by
to.
a state or territory.
Yes, that's correct. And he was asking whether that one, is there just a specific number of places for that visa, or a specific number of visas being offered, or is it open just like the skill also to just covering the prerequisites, covering the eligibility, and then you can apply for the visa?
So basically with a 190 visa, you must have an eligible occupation in the list of an eligible state or territory. Every state and territory has its own list of occupations. You also must meet the requirements of that specific state, and the Department of Immigration allocates certain number of 190 nominations to each state. So they cannot grant nominations to everyone because they have a limit set by the Department of Immigration, but also in the same state, they have priority occupations. So they will probably grant nominations to the high priority occupations first. And if they still have spots available, then they will consider other applicants. There are some other states that work by invitation. So that means you cannot apply for a nomination with that state directly unless you receive an invitation from that state. And there's no guarantee that you will receive an invitation because it depends on many factors. It depends on what visa, how many visas or how many nominations they have available, if your occupation is in the priority list for that state or not. Some states publish the priority occupations. Some states don't have that information published. So it depends on many factors. But it's possible to apply for this visa as long as you meet the state requirements, as long as you receive an invitation from that state, if they work by invitation.
And then just to be clear, because this is something also that other people have asked me, and so that I can also advise, if you are studying, can you apply at the same time for another visa?
Yes, you don't need, if you're eligible, yes, you don't need to wait until you complete your course of study or until your visa expires. And that applies to any other visas. You don't need to wait until.
And as you said, you apply, you go through that process, and then once you get that other visa, your original visa is canceled, and the one that is active is only the second one.
Correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Jocelyn.
Is any way to know how many places every state has open?
No, they don't have that information public.
Available.
A couple of years ago, probably, New South Wales had around 4,000 spots for nomination. I'm not sure if that, as I said, that was 2 or 3 years ago. From that day, they haven't made that information public. So there's no way we can know. However, there's a way you can know how many invitations are issued by each state. And I can show you that in my next bit of the presentation.
Okay, that's good.
So, do you have something else to say, Miguel?
Yes, the last only to resume, if I want to pass to any kind of visa that allow me to work full time by myself, it's like right now, is any option?
It's only the general skill migration. If you meet the requirements for general skill migration visas and you have enough points, or you can apply for a state nomination, I think that's the only option available for your particular case.
Okay. Okay, then maybe in the presentation we can cover that.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Frankie, do you have any question on your side?
No, all good.
From there.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Paola, anything from you?
No, I think my dad would be a little bit more specific because my case is, like I mentioned,
Yes.
region visa B, because I'm applying for partner visa. So since it's different case, it's not a student, it's no worker, doesn't apply any of the cases.
Yeah, it's a completely different story. Yes.
That's
It's in
right.
the limbo at the moment.
That's right. I exist and I don't exist at the same time.
Okay, then if everyone is okay, then Jocelyn, we can go to your part of representation, please.
Okay, sure. Let me. So, oy. Can anyone see the slides now?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, I can see
Yes,
them.
sorry, I restart Paulina's one.
You can present too.
Okay, so that's the rest of my presentation. It's about general skill migration visas.
Great.
I will do this section very quickly. There's a lot of information. There are several visas of class. The requirements for every occupation are different, so I'll just do it in general. I've done a webinar with Paulina, as I mentioned before a few weeks ago, that we can share the link. This is like the full presentation for this particular kind of visas, where I cover most of the information very, very thoroughly. So we can send you the link for that presentation, or you can contact me if you want to know about the specific information for your particular case. But in general, there are three main general skill migration visa subclasses, sorry, four. They're all points-based options. The first one is the 189, is known as a skill-independent visa. That means that all the points you can claim are your own points. You don't get any points by any relatives or by any state or territory nominations. So this is the 189, that's the independent visa. Then we have the 190 and the 491. These two are sponsored by a state or territory. As I previously mentioned, every state and territory in Australia has its own occupation list and have their own requirements to be able to apply for any of these nominations. Main difference between 190 and 491, the 190 is a permanent visa. So as soon as the visa is granted, you are a permanent resident of Australia. The 491 is a temporary visa. It's valid for 5 years, but it's a pathway to a permanent visa. So you must meet some criteria to be able to apply for a permanent visa through the 491 visa subclass. The last one is the 491 through family sponsor. So this one is basically sponsored by an eligible relative, and an eligible relative will be a first, like your direct relative, like brother, sister, auntie, uncle, grandmother, grandfather, father, mother. It has to be in first grade, so it doesn't apply to cousins or aunties, uncles on second grade. So it must be on the first grade. The requirements are very similar. You must meet the points test. You must be under 45 years of age. You must have an eligible occupation. So for the 189 visa for the independent and for the 491 sponsored by an eligible relative, you must have an occupation in the medium long-term list. This is like the main list of occupations. Is quite short. So occupations like accountants, engineer, lots of health occupations, lots of trade occupations, IT occupations are in this list, but it's also kind of short list. So if you want to apply for a 189 or for the 491 through family sponsor, you must have an occupation in the medium long-term list. If you are applying for the state sponsorship stream, that's the 190 or the 491 sponsored by a state or territory, then you can use the short-term list, which is a list that has more occupations available, but the condition is a state or territory must have your occupation in the list because they don't have all the occupations available from the short-term list. They just make a selection of occupations. So you must have an occupation that belongs to the short-term list, but also that it's included in the list of a given state or territory, but also you must meet the requirements for that state or territory. That's the difference in the occupation list. Whether you apply for the state sponsorship stream, for the independent stream, or for the family stream, you must have a positive skills assessment in your nominated occupation. That basically means you must get your overseas or Australian qualifications recognized by the official assessing body in Australia, and they must outline what's your nominated occupation. And you must apply for this visa under that given occupation. You must have competent English. Competent English is an intermediate level of English, and it's IELTS 6 in all 4 bands. The Department of Immigration also accepts all other, other tests like PTE, TOEFL IBT, Cambridge, OET for health occupations, but it's always measured against the IELTS. And in this case, competent English is IELTS 6. For a skills assessment, some skills assessing bodies may require a higher level of English. Some of them require IELTS 7 academic, like accountants, nurses, teachers require IELTS 8. So you may need a higher level of English to meet the skills assessment requirements or to have more points, because competent English, which is IELTS 6, gives you 0 points. If you want to claim points for English, you must have IELTS 7 or IELTS 8. Then the next requirement, you need to meet the minimum points test. In theory, the minimum points test is 65, and it applies for the 190 and 491 through the sponsor by a state or territory. The states usually don't care how many points you have, as long as you have 65 points. You still can get an invitation, because what they look in your application are other factors, such as first, if you meet eligibility for that state, if you have studied in that state, if you have family living in that state, if you have secured a job in that state, and things like that. So they usually don't care much about how many points you have, as long as you have at least 65. The states and territory, if they approve the nomination, they can give you extra points. So they give you 5 points for the 190 visa and 15 points for the 491. And the last requirement is to be nominated by a state or territory. It's only for the 190 and the 491 visa subclasses through the state or territory nomination. So for the 189, you don't need to be nominated by a state or territory necessarily, but you must receive an invitation from the Department of Immigration. The next one is what is assessing the points test. So the points test usually assess your age, your English, work experience. Work experience is split in 2. So one is the overseas work experience. The other one is, sorry, I'm 1 slide behind. The other one is the Australian work experience. They also assess your qualifications, your level of qualifications. So you will be awarded points according to the maximum level of qualifications. So if you have a PhD, you can get the maximum points for qualifications. Bachelor and master are on the next level below, and then trade qualifications are below the points for bachelor and master.
Quick comment or question, Jocelyn. In the Australian work experience, that has to be directly related to your profession or your the one that you're applying for?
Yes, but the Australian overseas qualification, if you are claiming points for that, the employment must be related to the nominated occupation, closely related to the nominated occupation, must be a paid employment, must be employment completed after your qualifications. So you cannot count any employment before you obtain your qualifications. And you must provide proof of paid employment, because anyone can provide an employment reference letter. However, you also have to show that it was a paid employment through payslip, superannuation, social security, bank statements, things like that. So
Okay.
that applies for both overseas and Australian qualification. Sorry, overseas and Australian work experience. There are some additional points that you can claim. If you meet the Australian study requirement, that's studying 2 years in Australia at a required level. Another one is the community language or the NATI test. This is the CCL test, and it's basically doing a test to, it doesn't certify you as a translator or interpreter, but it assesses your ability to translate or interpret it. If you pass this test, you can get extra points. It can be from your home or your native language to the English or on the other direction. If you complete a study in a regional area, this is minimum 2 years of study in an eligible regional area in Australia, you can get additional points. You can get points for your partner, or as I said before, I'm not sure if I mentioned before, but if you are single, you get extra points. If you complete a professional year, which is basically a course of a study that you can do after you complete your formal qualifications in Australia, this is only available for engineers, IT occupations, and accountants. They can claim extra points. If you study a specialist qualification, this is basically a PhD or a master degree by research, you can get additional points. As the state and territory gives points if you apply through the state or territory pathway, and family sponsor can give you additional points as well. So these are basically the points that you can claim. The process to apply for any of these visas is very straightforward. The first step is lodge an expression of interest. This is not a visa application yet. This is just telling the Department of Immigration that you are interested in applying for any of these visas and you meet the criteria. You can either receive an invitation or you cannot receive an invitation. This will depend on many factors, but the first step is to lodge an expression of interest with the minimum points that you have. The second step is if you get an invitation by the Department of Immigration, you have 60 days to lodge a valid application. You are not considered to have applied for this visa until you have received an invitation and until you have lodged a valid visa application. The first step is obviously apply for a visa and just wait for the visa to be granted. If you apply for any of these visas in Australia, you can get granted a bridging visa A, which is a very flexible visa that has full working rights. You will have travel rights if you wish to travel. You can apply for a bridging visa B because bridging visa A doesn't have travel rights initially, but you can easily apply for a bridging visa B if you want to travel overseas. And also if you apply in Australia for a permanent visa through the GSM pathway, which is the 189 or the 190, as soon as you pay for the application, you are also eligible to Medicare. That's important to mention. If you apply through the business sponsor pathway in the step 1, apart from lodging the expression of interest, you have to apply with that state or territory for the nomination and wait for it to be approved. Once the nomination is approved, you automatically will receive an invitation from the Department of Immigration. That means you don't have to wait for an invitation as long as the nomination is approved. That's basically the process. Then these are some statistics from the last round of invitations that was sent on 11 of April 2020. This only includes 189s and 491 visa through family sponsor. So these these numbers don't include the state and territory nominations. They only sent 100 invitations, including both the 189 and the 491 through family sponsors, 50 each. And as you can see, they only invite applicants who have 95 points or more. I don't really know how people can have 110 points or 115 points, because it's very, very, very difficult. The number of invitations is very limited at the moment. So it's very, very challenging to be eligible for a 190 visa, which is the independent, or for the 491 through family sponsor. So people who are not eligible for any of these two, because the points are very high and the invitations are very limited, must consider the other two options, which are the state and territory nominations. There are some occupations that are considered as high-risk occupations. This is the list of high-risk occupations. It doesn't mean that these occupations are about to disappear from the list or something like that. It just means that there are lots of applicants trying to apply with these occupations, and the spots that the Department of Immigration have available for these occupations are just not enough. So what they do is they increase the points. These are the minimum points that they invite in the last round on 11th of April for these occupations. For example, accountants only got invitations with 100 points or more. Even the points for other occupations were 95. These three are interesting ones. That's industrial, mechanical, production engineers, other engineering professionals, and ICT business and system analysts. The Department of Immigration invited applicants for a 189 visa subclass with 95 points, but for the 491 through family sponsor, they only invited applicants with 105 points or more. So that's something to consider when trying to apply for these visas. And that's what I was just talking about. That's the number of invitations issued by every state or territory in March. With the 189, the invitations are always sent once a month, and it's always in the 11th day of every month. With the state or territory nominations, they can be sent any day at any time. So they don't have a specific dates to send invitations. That's why these numbers are for the month of March. And it tells you how many invitations every state issue for these months. So for example, Queensland, they didn't send any invitation. That's because they have the 190 program suspended. New South Wales, they sent 327 nominations. A thing that we know is New South Wales has the highest number of nominations available. So that's also why here it's shown that they send more invitations than any other state. Then the next one, Victoria, sent 278. And then the smallest states, they just sent a few invitations, 89, 54, 59. For the 491, this is incorrect. It's not through the family sponsor, it's through the state sponsor. We can see again, New South Wales sent 0 invitation. That's because the requirements for this visa through New South Wales are very, very strict, and it's by invitation only. But other states, for example, Queensland, Victoria, Tasmania, have the highest numbers of invitations. So compared to the previous figures where we saw that only 100 people was invited for 189s and 491s through family sponsor, this one tells us that states and territories issue over 1,000 invitations for the 190 visa subclass and 763 invitations for the 491 visa subclass. This means that at the moment, this is a more realistic option for applicants. So my advice is to consider any of these visa subclasses and work to meet the criteria for the states or territory to apply for these visas. That's basically all. As I say, we can talk for hours about this because every state and territory has their own criteria. I can cover that in any other occasion, but at the moment, that's all for the general skill migrations and permanent visas. If you have any questions, you can ask now if we still have time. If we don't have time, we have a special promotion at the moment. If you want to book a consultation with me or with any other agent from I-Migration, because we are for agents, 2 of us speak Spanish, so you can book either with me or with any other agent. Our normal price for a consultation is $175. But at the moment, because we know about the difficult situation that most of temporary visa holders are facing, we have dropped down the price for consultations to $95. And all bookings must be done through the website. This is the link. And if you use this code, Better Now, you can get a discounted price. Consultations at the moment have to be done through Skype or over the phone because of the current situation. We are not able to do face-to-face consultations. But if you have specific questions or you want your case to be assessed closely, you can book a consultation. Otherwise, if we have time still now, we can answer some questions if someone has questions.
Thank you very much.
I do have one.
Okay.
Go ahead,
Sorry,
Paulina.
Jocelyn. I'm going to ask a question before behalf of my sister. She's already doing her master in practicing accounting, and I remember you said something about the specific situation for accountants in Victoria. I just wanted to know, like, what's that about? Because as you said now, accountants are basically, well, they have to achieve at least 100 points, but I don't remember you said something about Victoria being different. Is this correct?
Yeah, actually, the state of Victoria has a very interesting program at the moment for 491 visas. If you are in Victoria, you can apply for a 491 nomination through the state of Victoria for any occupation. It doesn't matter in which list the occupation is. So this is a very good opportunity for people who has either high-risk occupations such as accountant, engineers, IT, or who have like not common occupations like, I don't know, chef, for example, is in the skill list, but cook is not. Cook is in the other list. So for those who are cooks but not chefs, they can apply through this 491 nomination. Interpreters, translators, I don't know. There are some occupations like aquaculture engineers, some very specific occupations that are not very common. It's a very good opportunity because Victoria is accepting applications for all occupations, no matter what. You only need to show 65 points and the state of Victoria gives you 15. So that means you only need 50 points, which is basically nothing. Anyone can have 50 points. Of course, Victoria has some conditions. One of them is you must secure a full-time employment in your nominated occupation in regional Victoria. So that's one of the conditions. It must be a full-time position and your employer must offer you a 12-month employment contract. But you don't need to work there for a minimum or a certain time. So if you meet the criteria and if you get employment today, you basically can apply for this tomorrow. You don't need to be working in that occupation in regional Victoria for a certain time. I'm not sure how long this option will be available because it sounds very easy. The hardest part is to find a job in regional Victoria. But for those who can manage to find a job, that's a very, very, very good option. It's not a permanent visa straight away, but it's a pathway for a permanent visa. If you get the 491 visa granted, it's a guarantee that you will get permanent residency, even if things change, as long as you meet the criteria, which is basically work and live in regional Australia. It doesn't need to be Victoria. That's a good point. You can move from Victoria to another regional area for 3 years. After you meet the 3 years living and working in regional area, then you can apply for the permanent pathway.
Okay, good. So it's the 491.
Yes, that's the 491 for people who is on a student visas. Probably it's good to meet the criteria or to apply for a graduate visa, because this graduate visa will give them the time and the chance to apply for this full-time position. At the moment, this is the best program available in all Australia. Tasmania also has something similar for this visa subclass. However, Tasmania requires you to live and work in Tasmania for at least 6 months.
Excellent.
Whilst Victoria doesn't require anything.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And cities, for example, like Ballarat, Bendigo,
yes.
Is Geelong considered regional or
yes, there's a list of postcodes that I can share you if someone wants a list. I can share also the points test with anyone who wants a points test,
okay.
but it's not by the name of the location. It goes by postcode. But
postcode, okay, but you can
cities,
get it from there.
Yeah, cities by Geelong, Bendigo, Ballarat. There even are some metropolitan areas that are considered as regional. For example, where I live in regional Victoria officially. I live in Merenda. For whoever doesn't know where is Merenda, it's just a bit further away than Bundura. But I travel to the city usually every day to work, and it's considered regional. Another is Pakenham, which is also part of the metropolitan area, and it's also considered regional. So you don't have to go very far necessarily, but you need to work hard to get that job, to secure that full-time employment.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question. Jocelyn, in case I make an appointment with you, during that time, are you able to help me out to figure it out? What are the chances I have to apply for an independent skill visa, or do we need to
no,
the whole process?
No, we just need one session. I basically need some specific information about you, your employment history, your qualifications, check if you're eligible or not for a skills assessment. As I said, if you cannot get a skills assessment as an architect, there are some other similar occupations that you can use to apply for the 190 or the 491 visa. We do the points test during the consultation, and at the end, we'll give you like different options. You can do this, or this. This is the pathway for each of one, and we can provide a quote as well of how much would every option will cost you, and a timeline of approximately how long will it take you to get to a visa for each of those options.
Okay, because I heard very good comments about you regarding other architects actually.
Okay,
and thanks to Arturo actually as well. So yeah, I'm so new to Australia. Unfortunately, I came in the wrong moment, so I don't know anything about all this. And yeah, for sure, I'm gonna book.
Are you from Mexico?
Yes, 100%
okay.
Mexican.
Okay, yeah, I have done a few architects from Mexico.
Yeah, I think two. Well, at least two girls told me about you. Like, they go through another job, not not like construction something or building management or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, there are some alternative occupations because, as I said, it's hard for architects with overseas qualifications to get a skills assessment, just because the construction standards are not the same in Mexico than in Australia. So you never could meet that criteria because you didn't study Australian standards in Mexico.
Okay, well, definitely I need to book with you. I don't know if there's more people asking, otherwise I will cover you with all my questions now. But
well, for those who want to have a little bit of, like a glimpse of what Jocelyn does, we have the webinar. Actually, it's a webinar in Spanish where she explains all these kinds of visas in detail. So you can go through that webinar that goes for an hour and a half, I think. Jocelyn speaking for an hour and a half So it's more than the standard consultation. It's like 2 consultations free. So you can go through that one first, take your notes, your questions, and then you can go more prepared to your personal appointment.
And I read also about self-employment visa or self-sponsorship visa or something like that. I mean, my goal to stay here in Australia is to get my own business. I don't care about like working as an architect, to be honest. So I don't know if you have any other link where I can go through that info.
Actually, it's illegal to do a self-sponsor. That's not allowed by the Department of Immigration. You can be sponsored by a business from which you are not a director or owner. So
Okay.
that couldn't be an option, doing a sponsor through your own company.
But it may be the investment, or there's another visa for.
There are investment visas, but these are part of the state and territory programs as well. So you have to be approved by any state or territory. They have to tell you where and how much to invest. So that doesn't mean that I'm going to open a Mexican restaurant and this is an investment. It doesn't work that way. So the state and territory will tell you where to invest, how much you have to invest, but there are usually large amounts of money. I'm talking about millions of dollars.
Okay. Well.
Okay.
Right. But if you...
Yes, go ahead, Jocelyn.
If they don't have any other questions, we can leave it here. We're doing the same seminar tomorrow in Spanish for anyone who is interested in hearing the information in Spanish.
That's correct.
Okay.
So if you want to join tomorrow, again, we'll be with Jocelyn and Paulina going over the same information. It's just going to be in Spanish. And probably if we have more questions during the day, or if there's something else that you think of that you'd like to ask, we can also do that tomorrow.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Can you send the presentation? Both of them, they are very interesting.
Yes, I think Arturo or Paola can send it to you by email. As I say, if you want the points test or the list of regional areas, just ask any of them or email them, and I can send the files to them so they can share with anyone who is interested in having those documents.
Okay, thank you.
This recording will be shared as well, I think, on social media.
Yes,
no?
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah, we'll be. We haven't yet figured out exactly how, where we're going to put it, but yes, we'll be sharing this with everyone.
It'll be there. It'll be out there.
Yes, it will be out there. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So, well, if no more questions or comments, Jocelyn, Paulina, we really want to thank you for sharing your knowledge, sharing your experience, and your advice. Really, there's nothing that can buy that except several sessions with Jocelyn or Paulina. So
we work together, by the way. So yeah.
Exactly. So what also one of the things that we wanted to comment on is that, especially for example, like in your case, Miguel, where you are studying, it's always good to go with both experts. I mean, like Paulina, who is an expert in education, and Jocelyn, who is an expert in immigration, because they usually complement each other. And then each of them can tell you with which part they can help, okay? Sometimes a lot of people go to one person thinking that they can solve all their problems with an education expert, and it turns out that it's more of an immigration matter and the other way around. So it's always good for people like you who are studying and who really like to assess their choices to go with two people like them who work together, who complement each other very well, and then make an assessment on the full situation, not only on the studying part or the immigration part, but everything as a whole. So that's another recommendation from our side. And also, I mean, with Jocelyn, we have already worked in the past. Yeah, I have a lot of friends who have worked with her. And also from Paulina, I've only heard excellent things. So yeah, we are confident that they're going to be a very good help for anyone that turns to them. So,
at your service.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Thank you very much, Paola, for organizing the session. And if no one else has anything else to say, hey, what's up, Victor?
Yeah,
I'm a little late. Sorry, guys. I just found out this the message on my face. I said, "Wow!" But yeah, so, wow.
We're recording the session, so we're gonna make it available. And tomorrow, we're gonna have another session in Spanish. We're gonna cover the same information, probably not the same questions because Jocelyn and Paulina already answered a lot of those. But if any of you wants to connect tomorrow, we can go over more things that you want to review.
Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to receive the record one.
Perfect.
Good.
Hey, guys.
Okay.
All right.
Everyone, thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
See you tomorrow.
Stay at home and take care.
Bye, guys.
On behalf of Exatec,
Thank you.
bye-bye,
Thank
everyone.
you, Frankie, for joining.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.